G'day folks, it's Raymond Foster. In this video, we're going to take a look at why it's so important to go free of anti-white meme pathogens, which restrict one's thinking to within the confines of the anti-white narrative. As we can see here, this is an example of such a thing. And just as a disclaimer, this is not a personal attack. This is simply just an example to use to bring awareness for folk and for educational purposes. This individual here says, on Twitter he became known as Based, in reference to a non-white Indian individual sharing a post which speaks about Thor. Now, simply because this individual speaks about Thor, and it's not necessarily in a derogatory way or negative manner, this individual is just like, oh, a non-white person talking about something white. Ooh, based, bro. And they don't understand, they don't realise that this is still a perpetuation of the anti-white narrative and anti-white meme pathogens. So, let us break this down. This individual says, speaking about Thor, okay, so a European, a Western god, a symbol, an archetype of Western kind. Thor represents us. So when you speak about the gods, you speak about us. Okay? That's any peoples with any myths or gods. They're stories and archetypes which project our own nature onto some other being, entity, in some type of mythological tale, etc. So, when folks speak about our gods, when folks speak about Thor, for example, they're inherently speaking about our biospirit, okay, our instinct, who we are at our core as members of Western kind. And this individual says, in regards to this, psychotic, madmen, warlords who consume a lot of drugs and kill entire races of men for amusement. Now, for those unaware, we live within an anti-white system which perpetuates an anti-white narrative for the purposes of harming innocent members of Western kind and promoting white erasure. One of the ways that this is done is through the justification of this abuse and harm, which leads to white erasure. And one of the main functions, or one of the main implications of justification for this white erasure and this abuse and harm of members of Western kind is the painting of members of Western kind as the bad guy within the anti-white narrative. To break this down a bit further for you, for those who have no awareness of this topic whatsoever, I'm sure we've all heard of the name Hitler, okay? We've all heard the name Hitler in our lifetime. And we've all had this name and this image, this figure associated with evil. Now, in the anti-white narrative obviously says that yes, Hitler was an evil white man, racist, etc., supremacist, etc. And I'm not here to dispute that. I'm merely here to say that in that same anti-white narrative, the same anti-whites also say that it would be a good thing, if they could go back in time. So if we were able to go back in time and kill Hitler when he was a baby, all right? People say that's a good thing because of the anti-white narrative, because of the justification, okay? Because he's painted as a baddie in the anti-white narrative. So if you harm even innocent children, even innocent white children, okay, Hitler as a baby before he did anything wrong, they say if we killed him as a baby, that's good for humanity. Okay? So in the anti-white narrative, even killing innocent white babies simply to stop potential threats of racism is a good and noble thing. Okay? And in the same anti-white narrative, they say that they must eradicate racism. And again, in the same anti-white narrative, it says that your white babies equal racism. You can even Google this yourself. It's in mainstream articles. It's in studies being put out by Harvard University, the leading, scientific studies in the world. And they're coming out and they're saying, because of the anti-white narrative, because they are anti-whites, that, your white baby is racist at 3 months old. All white people are inherently racist. Even your babies are racist. And then out the other side of their mouth, they say, and we have to eradicate, quote unquote, racism. So if your babies are racism, and then they're saying they have to eradicate racism, where does that logically lead? 1 + 1 = 2. Pretty straightforward. That means they want to eradicate innocent white babies. Obviously, they haven't been able to justify it to that point yet, but that is where the justification is leading. And that is what the white narrative says. And again, in the same way, they already say, if we could go back in time and kill Hitler as a baby, it would be a good thing. So for them to come to the point of complete moral justification for ethnic cleansing of innocent white babies, all they have to do now is simply, over the next decade, continually say that, look, these white babies are racist. And they're already saying it. But if that becomes an established fact, and if that becomes an accepted established fact within the anti-white narrative, that yes, these white babies are inherently racist, and then the goal of the anti-whites is to eradicate racism, well then that only leaves one option, doesn't it? Total white erasure. So, that's how anti-white meme pathogens of the bad guy within the anti-white narrative are used to justify the harm of innocent members of Western kind. Every time any white person is called, for example, the R word, racist, alright? So every single time in all of human history when a white person has been called racist, that is a part of the anti-white narrative. It is a meme pathogen, okay, which is used to then justify white erasure. No? In the same way that because Hitler's evil, so it's good to kill him as a baby, if you can make white people the bad guy, it's okay to kill them as babies. Because you dehumanize them to the point where it's the good thing to take them out because they're monsters and they're evil inherently. So if you take out evil, you're the good guy. Even if you call the babies evil, you still end up being the good guy. And that's what anti-whites rely on. They rely on this image of the evil white man, the baddie in the anti-white narrative. They rely on concepts like racist and supremacist to slander members of Western kind with, in order to create this justification to paint themselves as the good guys and all of the white race as evil and bad. When in reality, obviously, the reverse is the truth, and the anti-whites who call white people racist are the evil ones perpetuating an ethnic cleansing. Even if they're unaware of it. Alright, so for those of you who perhaps this is the first time you've heard about these types of concepts and you've never had this wisdom shared with you before, when you use the concept racist or racism, you are perpetuating the harm and abuse of innocent children. Because, again, at the end of the day, the R word is no different than the N word, except it's not for non-white individuals. It's a slander a racial discriminatory slander for white people. That's all racism is. It doesn't actually exist in the real world. Racial discrimination exists. There's such thing as racial discrimination. And using the concept and the word racist is a type of racial discrimination. But what people think of racism isn't real. It never has been real, it never will be real, it never can be real. It's simply the N word for white people. And you probably, if this is the first time you've heard about this type of thing and you're just learning about the anti-white narrative and anti-whiteism, this might be brand new knowledge to you. You might actually have thought your whole life that racism was actually a real thing, that racism actually exists. So this might be a bit hard for you to take in. You might have to rewind a bit and listen over it again. But yes, it's a fact. It's a simply provable fact. Nobody can deny this fact. It's that easy to prove. All right? That there's no such thing as racism. There never has been. There never can be. It actually cannot exist. It's a logical fallacy. It's a slander, a racial slur against white people. So again, if you yourself have ever used the word racist, you've ever used the concept racist, if you've ever called someone racist, etc. If you've ever even just believed that when you've heard the word used or the concept used and you just believed in your own mind privately that it's a real thing, then you are perpetuating child abuse. The dehumanization and traumatization of innocent members of Western kind, innocent white children who are being abused through schooling systems, curriculum like critical race theory, which is simply just teaching white children to hate themselves and to hate their ancestors. Again, to paint them as the bad guy in the anti-white narrative to justify harming them. So, at the end of the day, it's just a matter of fact. If you believe in the quote-unquote concept of racism and you promote these ideas, again, it's okay to believe in racial discrimination and to stand against racial discrimination and to respect all people and all folks on, regardless of their race or any background or whatever, immutable characteristics. We should treat each as individuals. Treat everyone as individuals on the basis of their individual character, all right? And definitely stand against racial discrimination. Any form of discrimination we should stand against. But that doesn't mean that racism's real. Racism is not real. So you can fight to stop racial discrimination and you can be, adamant about that. And I'll help you. We can work together to stop racial discrimination. But when it comes to the concept racism, it's literally just the N word for white people, used to dehumanize us. So there's no justification, there's no excuses to continue using words like racist or concepts like racist. It's the same as calling a black person the N-word. If you continue to believe that racism is a real thing, it's the same as going out calling innocent black people the N-word. You are racially discriminating by using the concept racism because it's a slur against white people on the basis of our race. So if you want to do the right thing and actually fight against racial discrimination, you have to step outside of that anti-white narrative, stop promoting racial discrimination through the use of such concepts which are simply racial slurs like racist, and instead, if you want to talk about discrimination, talk about it as discrimination. But if you ever use the word racist, you ever use the concept racist, you're a part of racial discrimination because it's just a slur against white people. So we have here this individual talking about an archetype of Western kind, one of our gods. It's meant to represent who we are, our nature, all right? Or at least an aspect of our nature. Hence there's multiple gods to represent multiple archetypes of the nature of a folk. That's the point of mythology. Here we have this individual denigrating and talking down an archetype of our people and our folk. And we have an individual who is a member of our folk We have an individual who is a member of our folk who claims to be sympathetic towards the well-being of our folk and our people. And yet he is sharing, is retweeting this anti-white sentiment and slander of an archetype that represents who we are. And again, the manner in which this slander is portrayed and expressed here is exactly as I have explained, which is the anti-white meme pathogen within the anti-white narrative of painting all members of Western kind as the evil bad guy, therefore justifying the harm and abuse of all members of Western kind, even the vulnerable, the elderly, and the children. So there you have it, folks. That's enough for today, I guess. Remember, do the right thing. Try to make the world a little bit better than when you came. Leave it off, leave it a little bit better than when you came here. Do a little bit, help your community, do the right thing. Speak truth, stand up for the innocent and the vulnerable. Protect children, first and foremost. Defend our rights. And enjoy yourself. Take it easy. Until next time.